Hey, what's up, folks? This is Frederick Murphy, founder of History Before Us, back again with another episode. And I'm at a place that's very near and dear to me, back in the state of Tennessee. I'm here for homecoming, Tennessee State University, Go Big Blue. I went out last night, had a great time, but I got up early this morning to connect with Dr. Angela Sutton at a site in which I wish as a kid I knew more about versus constantly going to the Hermitage. That was like our annual field trip that we would go to as young kids in the 80s and the 90s. But we're here at Fort Negley, and Dr. Angela Sutton is going to show us around. It's a very unique location because we're like in the heart of downtown Nashville. Mm-hmm. And I think that a lot of people may easily miss this as well. And we can talk about that. But give us just like a quick overview of this site
Sure.
right here in front of the historical marker, which needs a little bit of...
It needs some adjustment.
It needs a little love, right? But we're going to get there. We're going to get there. Yeah. But yeah, take it away.
Hi. So Fort Negley is really the site of freedom here in Nashville. And that's what makes it so special, right? It is a site that really helps to understand why we are in the place that we are now today, politically, historically, right? Eric Foner always said that when you look at what is going on today in the world, and then you compare that with the way that history is presented to us in school, the history that we are taught cannot possibly explain why we are where we are today. Well, this history here at Fort Negley really helps to explain some of that, and that is why it is so important. We know that when the United States military came to occupy Confederate Tennessee, they protected the capital. Fort Negley was built in order to shield the capital from Confederate attack.
Nice.
Who built it, of course? It was enslaved people, both people who were in the plantations here in Tennessee, but also people who were refugees from slavery elsewhere in the South. They ran from as far south as Florida and as far north as, we've gone all the way up to Maine, right? And as far west as Texas. And so refugees from slavery ran here and they volunteered to work. Some didn't or weren't able to work and they were forced into it anyway, right? So there's this diversity of experiences. We also have this group of Black craftspeople, a lot of them free, who came and volunteered to work in exchange for pay. They were paid, but the enslaved were not.
So you said Texas and as far as way as Maine.
Yeah.
Right? Like, what was it about Nashville that was, gravitated them all the way down to Mid-South?
It's a great question. And there are a lot of it's a complex answer, but the simplest way I can distill it is that, when we think of the Civil War, we always think of all the Eastern stuff, right? Yep. Everyone knows about Shiloh and everyone knows about, what is it? The Newport News.
Oh, yeah, Newport News.
And Savannah, right? The March to Savannah, Sherman's March. And Gettysburg, like all of that, right? But nobody knows that the Western Theater was really where they planned to finish the war. So Nashville was the beginning of the end of the Civil War. Wow. So it was the linchpin of the Western Theater, and it's because of our geography, right? We are smack dab in the middle of the country and in the eastern half of the country. And so this is a place where the U.S. understood that if we could get Tennessee, could use that to push further south and finally end the rebellion.
Okay, nice. Now, I've been on this tour before, and when I started it, I went to the right, but we're going in reverse.
We're going in reverse.
Let's go.
Yep.
Let's do it in reverse. So what piqued your interest in this history with Fort Negley?
It was actually a conflict that happened in 2017 when the mayor tried to sell a piece of this park to make room for development.
Oh, no.
And, this is a city park. We all pay taxes. It belongs to us all together. And so that already incensed me. And so then I kind of looked into the history of the park. And what I found really shocked me to my core, right? Mm-hmm. So you have to understand, I'm a historian, I have a PhD in history, and my work was mainly in the slave trade. Yeah. So I look at human trafficking in West Africa. That was what my first book was about, right? Pirates of the slave trade. Mm-hmm. What happens when a pirate steals a slave ship, and how does that affect the way slavery was done here in the US? Mm-hmm. So when I looked at this site and realized this might be one of the only sites in Nashville that is about freedom instead of slavery. Mm. And I thought, how could we destroy this, but hold on to all the slave sites? Yeah. Like that, it didn't sit right with me. So I came to the Parks Board meetings, I came to the City Council meetings, and I had I had my little paper, my well-researched paper with my citations, and I was going to read it to them very sternly. But then when I got to the podium, my spirit left my body, and I just let him have it.
You had to give it to him.
I was like, how dare you? This is our city's heritage. These are our ancestors, right? And I say our because I know that it was mainly Black people who worked here, who died here, who really went through the hardest of times in order to obtain their freedom. Mm-hmm. but they're the ones that created our nation the way it is now, right? Without slavery or without legalized chattel slavery. Of course, we still have slavery because the world is the way it is, right?
Yeah.
But they're the ones that transformed this nation. And so they're the ones that changed the story for all of us.
Yeah.
So it is our heritage here. It's our ancestors here,
For sure.
right? And so it really offended me personally, and not to make it all about me, but at that moment it was about me. But then after I stepped back, there were some gentlemen in blue uniform, Union blue uniform, and an Abraham Lincoln impersonator in a top hat who came up to me and they were like, your anger could be really productive. Do you want to work together?
Wow.
And that was the start of my career here. And now 8 years later, I'm still still doing it. I'm still here. And I've shifted my focus from Africa to Southern US because honestly, it's not such a different story, right? When you look at slavery, African diaspora, when you look at white supremacy, it's all the same stuff. So after the anger phase, after we saved the fort from development, there was a lot of questions of like, what now, right? Because we couldn't just let it sit as this forgotten place, right? In the 90s, they called it Fort Neglect in the news because it was really, the city was just like not giving it what it needed to have its full potential. And so I started speaking with descendants, and the thing that sort of came through over and over again, especially when I was working with the Nashville chapter of the Afro-American Historical and Genealogical Society, AUGS, the thing that kept kind of cropping up is that people thought or knew or had heard from family members that they were descended from the Civil War population here, but they didn't know how to prove it, or it was too difficult to go through all the channels to find all that information. And I thought, that I can help with. And so I spent several years working with AUGS and with a couple of other groups around here, the African American Cultural Alliance and the people working at the Fort Negley Visitor Center. And we essentially researched all of the military documentation about the builders and the defenders of this site and the other Civil War sites here in Nashville. And we created this database that, I didn't know how big it was going to be. The sort of story was that there were about, 2,700 that were here. And I thought that's big enough to do the research on. But then it just kept growing and growing. And then as we started to do this work, people from the Nashville historical community kept getting in touch and being like, hey, I heard you were looking for something. I was looking for my ancestry. I did some of this research already. Do you want to see it? And so instead of having to go into the archives and do all my own research, what I ended up doing was just collecting other people's research and checking it up, doing spot checks on it. And of course, it was immaculate because Nashville's historians are immaculate, right? And so all I had to do then was connect it and make it searchable.
For sure.
And so if you go to buildersanddefenders.org, that is the kind of culmination of the work of the Nashville historical community and all of the wonderful donations that came in from all of the research. We found everybody who was recorded. Now, of course, I'm sure there are people here who were born here, people who died here, who never made it into any documentation, right? But everyone who was written down by the military as having been supervised and working here in some capacity is in that database, and it's about 19,000 now.
Yep. It's large, and when I had the opportunity to look at it the other day, of course, when I found one of my ancestors, I was just blown away by it. So you all are doing great work. Can you say that website one more time? Yeah,
buildersanddefenders.org, all one word.
All right, good stuff. So we ready to walk?
Yeah,
ready
let's
to do
it.
Let's go. All right, so we're rocking and rolling.
Yeah, so I'm taking you up this path. I think of it as like the quarry path, because we get to the side of the hill here, St. Cloud Hill. And this is one of the places where they were quarrying the limestone for the fort. Of course, there are many other places as well. Those have been identified by archaeologist Zeta Law. She works at MTSU, and she's been doing a lot of the geospatial and geophysical work around the fort, and she's the reason why we know where things happened.
So let me ask you this. Obviously, we see cranes back there. There's cranes everywhere. This is like Craneville, Tennessee.
It's Craneville.
Nashville. When individuals at historic sites see this, cranes everywhere, new development happening, what are the fears? Even though it's some of these sites are protected, etc., but there still has to be some angst that's there on what can potentially come, right?
Well, I think also people have an exaggerated sense of what protection means, especially in the US, especially in the South, right? Like, we really don't have very strong protections for historic properties and sites. The protections, so when you list something on the register, right? When you list something as a site of interest, when something like Fort Negley is a UNESCO site of memory, right? Like, these things feel really big, but there's no actual legal thing to stop someone from developing that place. The thing that stops people from developing is a group of people who care very much and who will not stop caring. That's the only thing. Bad publicity is the only thing that stops development. So I like to see this exposed sort of face because this is the side of St. Cloud Hill. It's all limestone. And this is where the enslaved people broke away bigger chunks of limestone to build the fort, right? And when we get to the top of the fort, you'll see some of those quarry marks on some of the stones. They cut big chunks of stone out of the limestone.
Yeah.
And then they had to shape them using a special technique that we'll talk about when we get to the top. You'll be able to see exactly how they did that because we still have the remnants of that in the walls.
Okay, cool. And so this is kind of used as like a greenway now as well, right?
Yeah, it's one of the only ones in this area.
When did it get back up and running to where it was presentable and people were able to actually come out here to enjoy the history and the park within itself?
Sure. So in 2007, under Mayor Bill Purcell's administration, the park was reopened as a Metro Nashville park.
Okay.
And they created a visitor center to be able to help people with genealogical and historical queries. So we've been really fortunate to have that running. It's been such a small operation compared to how many people's history is on this soil, though. Yeah, it was farmland.
It was all farmland.
Yeah, so you have to remember during the Civil War, and I'll send you a map so you can get a better kind of idea in your head of what that looked like. But Fort Negley was the outskirts of the city. Fort Negley was the outer limit of the city of Nashville, which is wild to think about now, because of course now we are buttoned up to downtown,
yeah, as you all see,
or
right
we are
here,
downtown. Right? But at the time, right, think about the geography of the war. There was the Cumberland River to the north and a big loop, right, that encircles North Nashville.
Yep.
That river was filled with Union gunboats, and those gunboats were trained on the city because the city was a Confederate state that was taken by the U.S. And so the gunboats were trained on the city so no one could try anything. And then Andrew Johnson, who at the time was in the military, he took all of the enslaved laborers who were willing to work at first and then had his military go and raid plantations for more. And he had them fortify the Capitol building because that's really the thing you don't want to be captured. Yeah. And then he came down and he built this system of fortifications right around the bottom circle, like from one river all the way down to the other end of the river.
Yeah.
And so basically the Capitol was completely encircled by cannons, by men, by retrenchments, by fortifications, by ditches, by absolutely everything you can think of. And that was all built by the enslaved. And Nashville was the second most fortified city in the country outside of Washington, D.C.
Wow. So when we talk about Sherman and the crew coming through and burning up places and things like that, how was Nashville affected by that, if any?
Yeah, I mean, I think it definitely created a sense of intense fear. When the Union came in and occupied the state, something that I think surprises a lot of people is that white Tennesseans were sort of split 50-50. So for white Tennesseans, half of them were with the U.S. and never wanted to leave. The other half were with the Confederacy and saw the Union presence as this undesirable occupational force, right? And so what you have to kind of also know is that the division is not as simple as you would think. There were many, many enslavers who wanted to remain part of the Union. And that is sort of a surprising thing as well. And that creates really interesting politics in Tennessee back then as well as right now, right? And so when the occupying forces came in, when they started enlisting people here in Tennessee, and then once they started enlisting the black troops, right, once that was legal, all of the Nashvillians here really were shocked. So a lot of them were complaining to the newspapers, right? They'd never seen black people with guns in a uniform.
Oh, it scared.
It was not something they'd ever seen.
It scared them to death, I'm sure, right?
It did. And even beyond that, just like the idea of their entire city being overwhelmed with soldiers, right? There's something that also, again, nobody knows about Tennessee, is that because there were so many soldiers, venereal disease ran rampant and the women of the city were in danger. And so they created a legalized prostitution zone in the city.
Where
and they had right downtown, right on Church Street.
The red light district.
Yeah. Okay. And so they had legalized sex workers that they brought in.
On Church Street.
On Church Street. That's how it always works, right? All the bikes on Church Street. Yeah.
Exactly.
All the churches on Gay Street. That's how it works.
Yeah.
And so they had like this like legalized zone of sex workers that worked, and a lot of the refugees from slavery were there helping out the sex workers, like doing the cleaning, doing like assisting the nurses and things. Doing the recovery for a lot of the women who got those diseases and had to like spend time out to recover from them.
That is wild.
Yeah. No one ever tells you these things about our city. This is like, I think the only time the government like legalized on the federal level a brothel, and that was here during Nashville's occupation.
Wow. And as you all see, we are when I lived here, I went to school at Tennessee State, none of this was here. I mean, the interstate was here, but as far as just the development, and it's not that I'm not against development. I mean, development is
it's
good.
Nice to have a city grow around you.
Yeah, it's nice to have it, but are the things, is the economic growth being shared with the communities from an equitable standpoint?
Right.
And that's what we're not seeing, not only just here in Nashville, but other places across the country as well. And you change the narrative so much that the collective memory in which so many people once have or had present day as well as historically is completely gone.
Yeah.
And that's what the fight against the development is, from my subjective opinion, of course. And so go ahead, I'm sorry.
So while we're standing here and looking out over this side, I just wanted to share that this was one of the locations of the so-called Contraband camps. And so Contraband is a word that I'm sure many of your viewers are familiar with, but feels very derogatory, right? Like how can a person be a contraband? But it was because of the Contraband Confiscation Act of 1862 and then another one in 1864, where essentially President Lincoln said that any property that belonged to anyone who was supporting of the Confederacy could be taken by the U.S. military and used for military purposes. And of course, at that time, enslaved people were legally considered property, right? They were not considered people, they were considered objects, they were property. And so a lot of the enslaved people counted. Now, of course, because enslaved people are not a monolith, they are an incredibly diverse group of people with diverse experiences and diverse knowledge. A lot of them realized, like, oh, I'm contraband. Okay, then. And they stole themselves, right? They ran away. So they self-emancipated and they came here and they told the military basically like, hey, I'm contraband. You have to keep me. Like, you can't send me back. And the military agreed. And so they created a big camp right here. Right here, all the way down to the Edge Hill neighborhood. And then on the other side as well. It was huge, right? Nashville's Contraband camp lasted all the way up to East Nashville to Edgefield, where Shelby Park is now. So it was like this huge swath of camps. So we had tens of thousands of refugees from slavery who had like collected here because they knew that Nashville could sustain that population. Now, of course, it didn't end well. Let's start again. No, of course, it didn't end well, right? Because the people who were designated as sort of keepers of the camp, who were supposed to ensure that everyone had food, had water, had basic sanitation. What they did is they collected all the food the military sent and opened up a store downtown and sold it to Nashvillians instead of giving it to the refugees who were really in need of it. And so the story of many refugees was one of starvation, of trying to scratch whatever they could from the land. And that's why you'll see here at Fort Negley too, there are a lot of edible native trees here and native vegetation. And it's because both the first people who came here, the indigenous, who treated Nashville like a food garden, had planted a lot of them. But then secondly, because the enslaved people were eating as much as they could from whatever was edible in the land and throwing the seeds into the ground here, which is why everything here is the garden now.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
I can point out some of the plants too, because I think there's just just the plant history of Fort Negley is so fascinating to me.
We're here for all the history.
Let's do it all. Yes.
So after emancipation, what happened to the fort? Was it just sitting here for a while? Was it automatically open to the public? What transpired after emancipation?
Right, quite a lot. So immediately after the war was, of course, the Reconstruction period. And during the Reconstruction period, a lot of Black veterans from the war settled right here at the foot of the fort, right? And they made their homes here because they wanted to be near the protection of the military, because the military was still here at the fort. After Reconstruction, thank you, Andrew Johnson, all of the military members were pulled off the fort and the fort was decommissioned. And so it became just a ruin here in Nashville. And so a lot of people started to just like kind of use it to play in. They pulled pieces off of it. They went artifact looting, right? Like all these things. And eventually sort of it overgrew. Then of course we went into the Great Depression. When we tried to recover from that, there was the WPA was formed, right? And as part of the WPA, several white workers here mostly from Nashville were able to get jobs restocking the fort and trying to reopen it to the public in the form of a park. Of course, at that time it was a whites-only park that was surrounded entirely by Black neighborhoods.
And about what year was this?
I'm going to say like the mid-1930s, something like that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, right before the war. And so it was a park for a while. They even built a stadium, Greer Stadium, right, where they did the baseball. And then probably like after about like the 50s and 60s, we had the urban renewal period because the park started to go downhill again, right? It was blighted. It wasn't cared for properly. And so then when urban renewal came in, the park was sort of left overgrown because, well, you see this all over the South, right? There's this tendency And it's an American tendency, it's not just Southern. This tendency to sort of build on top of things that embarrass us, or things that are hard to explain, or things that don't quite fit with our narrative of how we would like to see ourselves.
Even
right?
cemeteries.
Yeah, right, right. Yeah, and so Fort Negley just sort of like became overgrown, became this ruin that a lot of people didn't go to. There were a lot of rumors in the newspapers that this is where police would come to interrogate difficult suspects. It was also a place where a lot of unhoused people came to seek shelter, right? And it sort of became that place that you don't go. And all the oral histories I've done here with people who grew up near the fort said that their parents were deathly afraid of them coming here.
Really?
Yes, and one of the reasons why is because it also has a long history of Ku Klux Klan involvement, right? And that makes sense when you think about the history of white supremacy and the Klan in the US, right? Because Fort Negley is this big, gleaming white limestone fortress that was built on the tallest hill in the city. So it was a giant middle finger sticking up to people in the city who missed the old ways, right? And so the Klan would come up here to try to reclaim it and try to make it an ugly thing for the black families that lived nearby. And I'll tell you a story of exactly how that transpired in the 1910s and 1920s when we get to a spot.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
So you see this plant here, this is called poke salad. And of course, it's this is not in its prime right now, but this is the plant in Nashville and in most of the Southeast, actually. It is the first to go green at the end of February, early March. So it's the first source of vitamin C and K and those really important antioxidants that you need after a long winter. And so everywhere you see poke salad, you can be pretty sure that there were Native or Black people living because they were the ones who really understood that nutrition, who brought it to the rest of Nashville and the rest of the Southeast. And now this is sort of like a staple food among people who are living poorly or rurally. And it's something that now I try to incorporate into my diet as well, because when we bought our house here, we saw a lot of it living in the backyard. It's everywhere because Native people put it everywhere.
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
Yeah, my mom cooked poke salad. Grandmother, I mean, you can go on the side of the road and just grab it. So yeah, I am very familiar with poke salad because we had it. And when we had a little extra money, she would sometimes mix some greens, turnips in with the poke salad just to kind of make it stretch. Yeah. Put some turkey neck in there to give it a little bit of flavor. So yes, poke salad, and that's P-O-K-E S-A-L-L-E-T-T.
That's right.
Is it two T's or one T's?
I've seen it both ways.
Yeah, I've seen it both ways as well. Yeah. It's definitely a staple in the South.
And there's also, it's fun because so I've asked white descendants and Black descendants who sort of grew up around this area about this plant. And yeah, Black people describe it just like you described the way your mother cooked it, right? Yeah. Cooking it like turnip greens with a piece of smoky meat.
And they throw
or fat
egg
back
in there as well. Sometimes they throw an egg in.
And a lot of white people do that. They make like an omelet sort of with it. Like they'll cook it down. You have to boil it first to get rid of some of those toxins.
A lot of toxins.
Yeah, and then after the second cook, you put it in a frying pan with a bunch of scrambled eggs and you cook it just like a spinach omelet. Yep. It's really delicious, actually. It's just nice to kind of like see these little touches, because even though there are so many voices here that we'll just never get to hear properly, and there's so many names of people who lived here, who suffered here, who worked here, who contributed to America that we'll never get the chance to really know more about, but they leave touches like this that continue on. And so I think that's really beautiful. I've tried to make a lot of that part of the tours here, because that helps us to remember, like, there are 19,000 people who were here, affected this place, worked in some capacity to save this space. And this is what they ate in February and March.
This plant did it. All right, cool.
Let's go up.
We're going this way?
Yeah.
All right. Time to burn some calories. This says Sally Port. Is that?
Yeah.
What is that? No?
Just some architectural feature, I think.
Okay, gotcha.
Shouldn't say just, but you know.
All right, cool.
You'll notice I'm like very narrow-minded. I'm like, the things I like, I will tell you about. The other things I'm like, oh no, it's a thing.
It's all good. I only have so many editing hours that I could dedicate towards it, so it's all good. But we are on the ascend. Wow. This is an amazing view, you all. Now, when they have reenactments, or do you all have reenactments and things like that here? Yeah. Is this one of the locations where that happens?
No, up until really recently, there were boardwalks here that covered everything. So this is a new development to have this open.
Okay.
We have reenactments up at the top and then down where the flag is as well.
Okay.
What's really fun about the reenactments is that the Together Parks and the people working at the Visitor Center decided there were going to be no ahistorical reenactments. So we're not going to the Confederates can't come in and change the outcome of the Battle of Nashville. It is not allowed. And so I was working with African American Cultural Alliance, and we pulled out stories from people that nobody knew here who had worked at Fort Negley in some capacity, and had up at the top of the hill some living history skits, essentially, that sort of broadened the scope of the war. So instead of just having soldiers, just having a battle, we did social history, kind of looked at the nurse that was working up here, multiple women who were doing nursing work up here, looked at Moses McGavick, who is someone who I think about a lot, because he was the youngest child to have built Fort Negley. He was 12 years old. He was owned by or enslaved by the McGavick family.
Yeah. And there's a road here called McGavick Pike that everyone is.
And several houses as well. There's the McGavick House, there's Two Rivers Mansion, right? Like all of these connections to these like major plantations and other houses that have that history. When little Moses was 12 and he came all on his own, and he was like, I'm a man, I can do this. And he volunteered to do this. And that's all we really know about him. And I've tried to find more about him. There are a few newspaper articles that suggest he remained in the area and had a big family. I'm just not sure if it is the same Moses McGavick or not.
Okay.
But the timeline does line up. And so it's kind of beautiful to see, like, he was part of that church on Capitol Hill.
Yeah.
He had many, many children. And when he died, he was preceded by many people. So there are probably descendants of him somewhere
around
in
here.
Nashville.
Okay, cool. All right.
So this right here is my favorite part of the fort, and I call these stones here the cornerstones of the fort. So in 2022, we had some heritage architects come in and do some repairs around the fort and the stonework, because we've had multiple tornadoes, really severe weather, right? The weather is getting worse and worse, of course, as it is everywhere, and that affects the stones. And so when they were making the repairs, they pulled apart some of these walls and then made a decision as to which stones get to remain and which need to be pulled out and repurposed in other ways when we get the master plan underway.
Mm-hmm.
These stones are the original stones stacked by the enslaved. And what we see here, especially right here, is a quarry mark.
Yeah.
This is a mark of the tools the enslaved would have used to prise that limestone out of the quarry, right?
Wow.
And then up here, these are brand new stones, and you can tell because the marks are still white because they've been done pretty recently.
Yeah.
But what is interesting about these is that you get these little marks here, right? These marks are made by what is called a feather and wedge. And this system of building and breaking stones is really old. It comes from the UK. Mm-hmm. And basically you put these little feathers into, here, put this down. Okay, basically, so you put like these little feathers, they look like this, and you stick them down into your stone base, and you put them in a line, and then you get like a little spike, and you throw it right into the feathers in a line, and then when you hammer that spike down, it makes the stone crack along that line that you made, so it's like a perfect break. And that's how you get these. And so we had the heritage architects use the exact same methods that the enslaved used so that the stones look uniform. And limestone weathers really fast. So in a couple of years, you won't be able to tell the difference between these stones.
Wow. Ingenious.
Yeah, it's really cool.
There's a lot of movement that's happening here. There's a station here, there's a station there, there's a station over there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're really fortunate. So we have a master plan for how this space will be transformed, because we got a $17.5 million gift from the city to fix the site up and to ensure that all the history reflects the reality of what happened here. I'm a consultant, as is Dr. Williams, who's going to be my co-author on the book about this space. So it's really wonderful to be able to have all this descendant input.
Right.
But as part of that process, we're going to need to put in new boardwalks and new interpretive panels. And the archaeologists currently here are digging in the places where the new panels and boardwalks will go. They want to make sure that whatever gets put in doesn't harm any of the artifacts that are still here beneath our feet.
What are some of the things that have been found thus far?
So a lot of people think that they're going to come up here and they're going to find treasure. They're going to find something worth money. You're going to find historical treasure. You're not going to find anything worth money. Right. And that's really important to emphasize, right? All the artifacts here, hey Adam, all of the artifacts here are really artifacts that tell you about the way that people interacted and engaged here. Okay. And so, for example, when you pull out, you're going to pull out pieces, broken pieces of the mess kits that soldiers had, pieces of their uniforms, maybe some buttons, maybe some of the garbage that they threw out or that it didn't quite burn all the way. And a lot of that tells you how people lived here. A lot of that tells you about also how they shared things out, tells you about their values, tells you about their diets, right? That's kind of how we know some of the plants around here were consumed by the people who were on the site.
For sure.
So it's really exciting from a historical standpoint, but the archaeology is so important because where the thing is found and what it is found next to, right? The context, the archaeological context of these things, that's really where all the history is. That's where the history that was not written down will pop out of the earth. which is why it's so important for people to not go and pick up things from the fort. Like, we really need someone to go in and record the context of the items that are found.
Instead of taking souvenirs home.
Yes,
That
right.
just collect dust because they don't know exactly what it is that they're doing.
Let me show you this bit here.
Yep.
So, something funny happens here in Nashville, and it happens everywhere, which is that some of the worst people have no shame, right? So there was a guy, Marcus Toomey. He was a high-ranking, I don't even know what it's called, high-ranking person in the Ku Klux Klan when it was very active here in Nashville in the 1910s, right? He wrote into the newspaper, the Tennessean, and he said, Fort Negley really ought to be preserved because it's a really important Klan history site. And he said, yes, I know,
Wait a minute,
the face.
what?
Y'all should see the face he's making right now.
God.
And so he said that he used to go with his buddies. They would go out drinking. They would come up here and they would swear in people right here in this like old, it's like a bastion where they used to store some of the ammunition for the cannons and things, right? Because you want to store them as far away from the direction the soldiers are going to be attacking as possible. So this one faces the city. So they would come down in here. Also, there were some tunnels that were made by some kids or people who were just sort of hanging out in the space because everything is limestone here and some of it's been hollowed out for the quarry. So it's really easy to sort of make some tunnels around, and all the descendants I spoke to agreed. They're like, yeah, there are lots of weird tunnels down there and you would find weird things, sometimes bones, right? Well, he said that the KKK would come here and swear in their new members.
At this
very spot, right
this
in
very
here.
spot.
Right in here, yeah.
Man.
And then right behind you, in this little flat area here, is where they would burn their crosses to intimidate all of the black people who lived in the neighboring
Because
neighborhoods.
you could see it because it's from...
You could see it from the whole city. The entire city would see this cross burning from the tallest hill in the city. And that is absolutely repugnant. But it is wonderful that we have the record of this, right? This man with no shame, because that helps us to really kind of think through, like, what did the enslaved and their descendants, what was going through their minds when they realized, like, this thing that they'd fought for, this place where their ancestors had died in blood, where their ancestors had been buried, like what they were going through when the Klan would come in and threaten them and do their ceremonies, and they would even ride their horses up and down this hill and try to like distress the neighbors that were living nearby, right? They would smash up the chicken coops and break the windows and like people living here, they were poor, right? They didn't have many windows to begin with. Many people had just one or two windows in their homes. So it was really a terrible time, and it really maps onto this like space here in Nashville, but also all across the United States where the Klan felt incredibly powerful and where black neighborhoods were continuously burned out of existence, right? And historians are only now sort of coming up with a lot of this stuff. Let's look at some of the viewpoints because I can sort of explain the battle a little bit better.
Let's do it.
So these parts here are the bastions where the soldiers would have hid waiting for attack that comes from the south, right? We're facing south right now. And from the south is like where the Confederates would have attacked because they had just had the Battle of Franklin, which they lost miserably at. They regrouped, right? General Hood and his crews regrouped. General Hood was on opiates, and I think he had lost a limb at this point, so he was not making the best decisions. So when he comes up upon Nashville, he sees this massive fort in the sky between him and the capital that he's trying to take. He knows he can't get through that.
Yeah.
And so then he has to make this like pincer formation. So essentially what happens is that they come in from the south, right? They see Fort Negley is here. The capital they want is right behind it. They can't get it. So they have to split the forces and attack from the sides, right, in this pincer formation. When they do that, on this side is Granbury's Lynette, right? On this side over here is right about like where the Costco is today in West Nashville. These are kind of the places where they have these fights. And because they're fighting here, they're in perfect view of the gunboats that the military the Navy had placed, right? And so there was just no way they could have won, but there's no way the Confederacy could have won without taking Nashville. And so this is really where the beginning of the end of the war happened.
And you are, I don't know if I can say this, but you're working on a book about the Battle of Nashville. Is that?
I am,
okay.
yeah, I'm working on the book proposal for it now. So it's still all very new, but I'm so excited about it because, you know, most of the Battle of Nashville books come at it from a very old-fashioned military history standpoint, which of course is important and necessary and helpful. However, something that I think people miss about the Battle of Nashville that I really want to emphasize is that, you know, we had 19,000 black people working in total, 13,000 troops, black troops who were fighting in the Battle of Nashville at Peach Orchard Hill, at Shies Hill, at Granbury's Lynette, right? All of these places where when you look at other battles in the Civil War, there just wasn't that level of black involvement, right? The Battle of Nashville saw the most black people fighting in it out of any Civil War battle. And when you look at where they came from, you look at how they fought, you look at what they did after the war, right? And what their descendants did here in Nashville. When you take all of those things into account, with someone from my background, right? My background is slave trade, looking at Africa, looking at the Caribbean, looking at the Atlantic world. So there are a lot of slave revolts in that history. There's a lot of like history of like revolution, of freedom, of the way the entire world shifted away from chattel slavery into a different labor system, right? And the Battle of Nashville fits directly smack dab into that history. So I'm kind of looking at the Battle of Nashville from an Atlantic perspective, stepping back and saying like, hey, what happened here with black folks in Nashville was the exact same thing that happened in all of the places where these slave revolts created a free population. And when you think of the Battle of Nashville as a slave revolt, it really changes the way we understand ourselves here in America, I think.
Yeah, I agree 1,000%.
The geography of the city now was completely influenced by Civil War geography. If you take a map, I'll send you one. If you take a map of all of the fortifications that form this like semicircle around the Capitol, and then you take a map of I-65 and I-40, and you superimpose them, it's the same map. It's the exact same map, right? And the reason for that, I'm going to give you a really quick rundown of this because this is so crucial to understanding our city. So when you look at this map, right, you have the Capitol, you have this circle. After the war, right, black people settled in that circle of where the forts were because the forts were safety, the forts were military, the forts were where they wanted to be. That's also why Fisk University is built on top of a fort, Fort Gillem, right? Jubilee Hall sits right on top of Fort Gillem. And when you go to Fisk University, there are still some buildings that have remnants of the stuff that was underneath, right? So, and that is the reason why all of the black neighborhoods are by the forts. Like all the black veterans settled right where the forts were for safety. It made sense, right? And so then when urban renewal came along in the 1950s, right, Nashville was offered 3 highways, 3 interstates to go through it because it's center. We're right in the center of everything, right? So we were offered 3 interstates and the city was like, absolutely, we'd love to be the center of everything. That's going to bring so much money to our city. And they had to plan out where they were going to put these interstates. And they're like, let's put them through the blighted black communities around the circle. And so now when you look at Nashville's demographic maps, it's this like center of Nashville, the capital, and its surrounding buildings. That's very white, very expensive, and a lot of unhoused people as well. And then you have the semicircle around it. Those are all the historically black neighborhoods. So these walls here are all original, all built by the enslaved in 1862. And you can tell that because it's all still dry stacked, and it was damaged pretty severely in the tornadoes of 2020 and 2022. Hopefully one day we'll be able to raise the funds to be able to sort of give them the proper treatment that they need to have.
Yeah. Now, were there any burials here on the site? I mean, I got to ask,
yes.
right? But
so
this
many.
wall is original, you all. So I want to show you all that this is original, and I got to come up and do what I do, which is touch it.
Yes, and you have to be really impressed, right? Because these walls, 1862, that's what, 150 years?
Yeah.
150 years still standing on the tallest hill in Nashville in what is pretty much the new Tornado Alley.
Yeah.
Like, it's amazing. It's craftsmanship. You will not find craftsmanship like this anywhere else in the city.
Not in the city, no.
And then behind you is the brand new wall that they've done. You can sort of see the difference there.
Yeah.
But that's what it would have looked like when it was built. It was really that tight. It was really that clean.
So, back to the burials.
Yeah. You wouldn't let me
No.
dance around that one. Yeah, so the official line is, I am not allowed to say that there are bodies in this park, and so I won't say that.
Okay.
What I will say is that I know that after the war, a lot of the war dead from everywhere, from all around the city, were brought here, right? It was black soldiers who were forced to do that work. They brought them here because there is a train station that is right at the foot of the fort, right? And so they brought them and put them in a big pile, essentially, at the train station, because that's where they were going to send back all the claimed bodies, right? The people who had fought from further away, they would be sent on trains, the bodies would be reclaimed. So many bodies were not reclaimed, right? And so over time, they start to degrade. It starts to be a health hazard for the whole city. And so they bury them in a mass grave, and they're like, don't worry, we'll get to this later. So then the city builds the Nashville National Cemetery up on Gallatin Pike in Madison, and they unearth the graves and remove several of the people in that mass pit, right? And so all the Union soldiers get buried, get the hero's burial in the National Cemetery. The Confederate bodies are removed and put into some of the Confederate cemeteries. Yeah. And then some of the civilians were removed and also sort of sent to various different cemeteries in the city. Now, I have a list of everybody who went into that hole. Okay. And I have a list of everybody who was reburied in other cemeteries. And those lists do not match. So there's that piece. The second piece is that Vanderbilt University Spatial Research Institute, Visor, they were hired by Brandon Hewlett, who is a librarian and a military history specialist, and in the reserves as well. So Brandon hired Visor to come in and do some GPR work in the places where we had identified those pits were. The GPR, when they did that work, they found that, quote, like the data was comparable to or consistent with the data that they would find in a limb pit or a body shaft.
Limb pit.
Limb pit, yeah. So basically a mass grave, right, where everything is mixed up, where all the body parts are mixed up. Yeah, and so, of course, we don't know that for sure because nobody has gone into that site. Sure. We're not opening it up, right? But the data is there, so read into that what you may. But I wanted to show you this site here because this street where this truck is driving here, this all is Bass Street, all the way down past the Science Center, right? And Bass Street was the name of the neighborhood that was here immediately after the Civil War. So a lot of Black veterans who fought here at Fort Negley and in other places, they came down and settled right here at the foot of the fort because they were in the safety of the soldiers who were stationed here. And because this is where the contraband camps were. So a lot of them had lived here before the war. Now they're coming right back to the only place they know. Yeah. Because what are you going to do? Go back to the plantation? Like, not if you can help it, right?
Yeah, not if you could help it, for sure.
And so they would settle here. They became one of Nashville's earliest free Black communities. But of course, there are many around the city because we have that whole ring around the outside of the city that is historically Black neighborhoods. Those were all essentially where the contraband camps were and where the free Blacks settled after the war, right? The only reason that a lot of Black people remained in Nashville, and I'll say this plainly, this is something that shocks people, but this is something that needs to be said. After the war, Black veterans were given the option. You can either take a full pension or you can take a partial pension and keep the gun that we issued you when you came into the military. Most of Nashville's Black veterans kept their guns. And because they kept their guns, they were able to stand up to white supremacists who wanted to push them out of their neighborhoods. Every single Black institution here, right? Fisk University, TSU, Roger Williams,
I had some ancestors that graduated from Roger Williams.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Wow.
I got pictures of them there.
I'll tell you about that later because that was another project.
Yeah.
So all of these Black institutions were protected by armed veterans who worked as janitors or otherwise groundskeepers of the space, but really who kept their guns on site and waited and watched at night for the Klan to come and try to burn things down. The only reason Nashville's Black population was able to grow in the way it did, to create these amazing institutions, right? Citizens Bank and Meharry Medical College and all of these other churches that had kept the history. The only reason we know anything about Nashville's Black population is because Black veterans guarded them with guns and kept doing so way into old age. And let me tell you about one of them that is truly my favorite Nashvilleian.
All right, let's talk about him.
Yeah, so his name is Leander Woods, and this is something that Betsy Phillips discovered and wrote about in the Washington Post back in 2017. And since then, I've been doing more research on him because he is turning out to be one of the most dynamic and interesting individuals to come out of this history.
Nice.
And I don't say that lightly because I got 19,000 individuals. It's a lot of stories rattling around in here, right?
Yeah.
But Leander Woods, his story was really grim. He started as a boy when he was working in one of those ironworks places on the border between Kentucky and Tennessee. There was a rumor, and of course, you know, white enslavers, they listened out for rumors. They were very paranoid, right? They were scared of insurrection. So there was a rumor that the people working in this place were going to revolt. And so to nip that in the bud, the enslavers, they beheaded the people they thought were responsible and put their heads onto the iron pikes that they had built. Yes. Right? And this is, I mean, you can just imagine the barbarism and the savagery that goes into like putting heads on pikes. Like this is some Lord of the Rings, like, you know, this is crazy. Not Lord of the Rings, sorry, Game of Thrones stuff,
Very
right?
barbaric.
Like, incredibly barbaric. And so Leander Woods was a teenager and he had to walk past the heads of his family members and the people he worked with, right, in order to get to work and keep working for the same enslavers who had killed off his family members. So when the war starts, he runs, he takes the opportunity, he self-emancipates and he enlists in the military immediately, right? So when he's enlisting in the military, he comes to Nashville. He was like, Nashville's the place to be. That's where the war is going to end, and I'm going to help end it. And he fights like a beast, right? He ends up going up the ranks because he is the most ferocious fighter. He has no regard for his personal safety, right? It's not a way you should be, but I understand why he is that way, right? I understand, because for him, this is an existential threat, right? He is doing something for America. He is doing something. And then, of course, he also gets demoted right back down to private at the end of the war because he had, what do they call it? An insubordinate character is what they called it, because he was done. He was done being told how he was going to live his life. So then after the war, the reason we know so much about Leander Woods is because the white newspapers could not stand him. They wrote about him constantly, every arrest, and he was arrested a lot. All right, so like they accused him of all kinds of things. They accused him of stealing dead soldiers' pensions. They accused him of impersonating a pastor and going around collecting donations for a church that didn't exist. They accused him of sleeping with a family member, which is not true because he did not have family in this area, so he couldn't have done that, right? But like they just made all these accusations. But in those accusations, we certainly learn a lot about what kind of a person he was, right? He was deeply resourceful, very smart, very sly, very fast, right? Very fast on his feet, and kind of a hothead. And those qualities served him really well when, in the 1910s, the Ku Klux Klan would come up to Fort Negley and intimidate the people who lived here, right? And so Leander Woods had a girlfriend who lived here on Bass Street, just right down that hill.
Right down the hill.
And this girlfriend was terrified because the Klan had, they smashed up her chicken coop. They threatened her. They said, "Y'all better leave."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the dog is not happy with us.
He's not happy.
Don't worry,
we're
buddy.
gonna have to move down, y'all. Yeah. I saw him creeping up right there.
Yep.
But the girlfriend.
He knew. I told you.
Yeah,
he knew.
you said it.
Yeah, so the girlfriend of Leander Woods was telling him, like, "Hey, I'm terrified," right? And he's like, "Don't worry, I got you." So he calls up all of his friends from the war, all of his veterans, and he says, like, "Hey, we need to do something about this Klan threat." And so they buy out Nashville's supply of gunpowder, and they wait for the Klan at the bottom of the hill. And then after that, right, after all of those newspaper articles, after so much complaint about the Klan and about what had happened here, suddenly silence. 20 years, no mention of the Klan at Fort Negley at all. Right? And when you think about that, right, like for 20 years, Leander Woods kept this neighborhood safe.
Yeah.
He made it so that the Klan was terrified to come back.
Yeah.
Right? He engaged the Klan in armed combat, and when archaeologists went through this site, which is a site that saw no fighting in the Civil War because it was inward facing to the city, they found bullets that matched Civil War. There were Civil War bullets all over this site, completely littering this site. Right? So like we can only imagine. I wish there were some more evidence. I wish there was a first-hand account.
Yeah.
But this is how it went down with the Klan, right? Like these things happened in the dead of night. They happened with no witnesses, and whoever was left to tell the tale didn't speak.
Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Where's he buried?
So he got the hero's burial.
Okay.
He's up in the Nashville National Cemetery, and we did a memorial service for him 2 years ago.
No historical marker for him?
Yes, there's going to be.
Okay, good.
I just got in touch with the Historical Commission.
Okay.
It is breaking news. It's not even. We haven't even written the marker yet.
All right.
But they want to do something for Bass Street, so Leander Woods is going to go on that marker.
Okay. All right. Cool.
And this panel is one that I'm deeply excited about too, because this right here, this shows you what the primary sources look like, right? This is how we know who is here. This is where all the laborers were written down in this same way. The labor rolls sort of look like this. All of the rolls of the soldiers that were here, that were in the Battle of Nashville, they all look like this. And then this photo, this is my absolute favorite photo of Fort Negley. There will never be a better photo of Fort Negley as far as I'm concerned. This is, from what we know, the first photograph taken at the Bass Street neighborhood. So these are the children and some of the veterans, the Black veterans who fought in the Battle of Nashville, who settled in Bass Street. Yeah. And unfortunately, the original photo is in a private collection. We found out about it because it popped up on an antique dealership website. And of course, we couldn't afford to buy it. So it belongs to a private collector now, whose name we don't know.
Or we just don't know.
But we do have this beautiful, they allowed us to get like a full proper scan of it so we can use that for historical research.
Sure.
So at least we have that. And it's really important here to kind of like show what this looked like. And then this picture here is really important as well, because it sort of like just shows us, like, look at this vegetation. They cleared it. They completely cleared every tree that was on this hill so that they could build. And then you can see up at the top here, there's a wooden fortification that was built on top of the stone that we were in. So where later the KKK would have burned their crosses, right? That used to be like a big wooden fortification where the soldiers were hiding in and doing their work.
Folks, so you all have gotten a lot of great information, and we're closing out the episode. But before we do, Dr. Angela is going to tell us about this historical marker that's here, and this would have been or is the most recent historical marker that's been put up on the site, as well as the location in which we talked about up top. But now we're down here at the bottom. We burnt a lot of calories today, you all. So I've reached my steps on my watch, so it's right there. But the significance of where we're at right now, even kind of like the divine situation to where this marker is right here. And close us out.
Sure. So we are here, sort of close to the intersection of Fort Negley Boulevard and Bass Street. This site right here is such an important space in the park because not only was it a space where the refugees from slavery lived in what was called contraband camps, right, where the laborers would sleep, where 800 laborers lost their lives due to disease that ran rampant in such poor working conditions. We were also in the space where after the war, all the Black veterans came and settled and built their homes right here. This was a vibrant Black neighborhood where people went to school at Fisk University and at Meharry, and where they worshiped in churches like the Bass Street Baptist Church, right? And so this sign here was put here by Kwame Leo Lillard, rest in power. He was a force to be reckoned with, let me tell you. And he was one of our Black council members in the 1970s here in Nashville.
Okay.
When he was a child, he jumped into a whites-only pool to try to desegregate, and Nashville chose to instead fill up all of its pools with concrete rather than desegregate their pools.
Wow.
And so, yeah, this is the reason why a lot of people in Nashville still can't swim, and Metro Parks is doing a lot of wonderful work to try to reverse that by having pools in historically Black neighborhoods, having pool parties, council members like Terry Vo coming in to urge Black children to learn how to swim, offering free or very low-cost lessons. It's really wonderful. But all that to say that the reason why this marker is here, I think, Kwame never said why, but it is sort of out of the way. One of the most important things to remember is not only the Contraband site, but the fact that Fort Negley Park extends through this whole area, right?
Yeah.
This Adventure Science Center here is on Fort Negley Park's land. So this is still Fort Negley Park. They lease it from the park for $1 a year.
$1 a year. I would
Yes.
take that any day.
It's a good deal in downtown
I would live
Nashville.
in the museum for $1
Same.
a year.
Right, including all that parking lot too. All of this is Fort Negley Park. All of this is the sites where refugees lived while they were building the fort. All of this is the Bass Street neighborhood where Black veterans lived in the early years of free Black society,
Yeah.
right? So all of this is part of the whole story. So having this marker out here reminds us that the story doesn't finish at the fort.
No.
The fort is only the beginning of a new story, of a better story, of a story where Black people have helped us to become who we are, and a story that we have to hold on to, especially now in these times.
For sure. And so this has been great. I always like coming out and sharing unheralded history, if you
Yes.
will. And so with that being said, provide the viewers where they can follow all of this work, websites, YouTube, et cetera, et cetera.
Sure, yeah, I would love to see all of y'all at the Builders and Defenders database. That's just buildersanddefenders.org, all one word. If you go through there, you can click on Descendants. You can get the Fort Negley Descendants Project, where we have many descendants who have come and spoken about their connection to the space and what that means in a gentrifying city, right? We also have the Fort Negley Descendants Project YouTube channel, where you can watch those videos, including the latest, a new documentary. It's a short documentary, 13 minutes, called What Happened to Bass Street. That one features Janine Blackman, who's the president of the African American Cultural Alliance and a descendant of the Bass Street community here at Fort Negley. You can also follow me on TikTok or Instagram. I am at Dr. Angela Sutton. It's just Dr. Angela Sutton, all one word. My TikToks are fun and spicy.
They
Please
are.
join me. I'll see you there.
Absolutely. And there you have it. And like I always say, if you like this type of content, please make sure to subscribe and share. Peace and blessings.